So Zorg says, academic agent has said that he believes the establishment has resigned itself to another Trump term because they believe they can confound him. In that scenario, they effectively diffuse the populist energy harmlessly. What do you think? I am always disappointed to hear that talking point. This is something that I discussed with Scrump and Aiden. I think academic agent is of that same ilk. I do very much like Scrump and Aiden, but I think they are of a certain mindset which tends towards willful pessimism, even in the face of facts. Now, they would say the opposite. They'd say I'm willful optimism, even in the face of the facts. But hey, we have our sides, and I prefer the optimism side, frankly, even if we're both right about the other. Our opponent cannot abide Trump getting into office. Academic agent, Scrump and Aiden, not sure how much Aiden buys this, but Scrump and academic agent are just wrong about this. Now, the idea of containment and diffusion of energy, that makes sense. Yes, that happens. But Trump ain't it. Now, if you can convince me that Trump has been compromised, that he won't do what he says he'll do when he gets into office, even though he did last time, then I will start to believe you. But that's quite a different claim. If he has not been compromised, I expect one of the very first things he's going to do when he gets into office is massive election reform, which will make the Democrats unelectable for at least 10 years, if not 20. He could do that by executive order on day one. And you're saying that they're willing to let him in? No, no, they are going to try everything they can to stop him getting in. Now, what academic agent and Scrump and people like them, I think, are setting up by saying that is a way to let them still be pessimistic, even when it looks like things are getting better, so the optimists can't be right. I don't think this is a cynical, deliberate ploy, but I do think that's what's happening. If the election is even just rigged as much as the 2016 election probably was, Trump will win enormously. Even if it's rigged as much as 2020 was, Trump will still win because he's doing better this year than he was then. They're going to have to pull out many more stops than they did in 2020 to rig the election. This is the result of popular support because our side has won hearts and minds, genuinely, on a massive scale, by the long empiricism of people living through these problems and observing the differences between the factors in place. Under Trump, oil was cheaper. That wins voters. Under Biden, oil was more expensive. Under Biden, a lot of bad things happened. Under Trump, well, I read about bad things in the paper, but I didn't really feel many bad things. They would remember that at the time. And they probably don't believe the press, a lot of them anyway. So on aggregate, hearts and minds are won, by which votes are won, and votes are just a reflection of the will of the people, which is ultimately how things change. By which our opponent has to work a lot harder to cheat, and cheating at this point is pretty much their only strategy. Cheating and propaganda, which is just a softer form of cheating. If Trump gets in, as I said, very early on, and if he doesn't do this within the first month, I will be very concerned. He will reform elections. I think it's very, very natural to assume. Reform elections to the point that the Democrats cannot win by cheating, which means they cannot win. And that will totally change the political landscape. And he could do that on day one. I would like to hear an answer to that from people that believe that Trump is containment. So Zorg says, the theory is that Trump himself might not be compromised, but the president can't directly fire the whole CIA, so they can just work around him. I think he can, actually. I don't know if Trump would, but I think Trump would make moves in that direction. Trump was aware in 2016 of how bad the swamp was. Well, okay, he was aware there was a swamp, but I think he was only about half aware of how bad it was. Now he's more like 95% aware of how bad it is. Now, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I don't think I am. But Trump is currently our best shot in the US, at least, and arguably for the entire Anglosphere. He's currently our best shot, and I do actually believe that he has got more wise to these issues since 2016 and since 2020, and that if he gets into office, he will implement many policies that will not only do the very good things he did in 2016 to 2020, which were long-term curative and obvious policies the US has needed for decades, but that he will, on top of those, also fix issues of corruption that are in the US right now, issues that he personally has seen. Possibly the greatest injustice that he has ever been faced with was the 2020 election. Do you really think that given plenary dictatorial power, never mind if he gets the House and the Senate, that he will not try and resolve that issue when he gets into office? I would like to hear their response to that. I would like to know how they think the establishment is going to just snap their fingers and mastermind their way around that. Probably they would say that these states will just disobey the law. That's an escalation. And it's probably not going to last. If you can bring up legitimate cause for why someone should not be in a position, it's a lot easier to get rid of them. And that's been the issue, is a lot of our opponents' crimes are well hidden. But if you make it federal law, even a constitutional amendment, if that can be done, or of just a few provisions to secure elections, i.e. voter ID, paper ballots, same-day voting, and the day is a national holiday, if Trump just implements those 4 things in 4 executive orders on day 1, then the Democrats can't win for 20 years. The only thing they can do then is refuse to obey those. And then even if there's a Democrat president in position, it becomes a lot easier for people to legitimately say, you are disobeying federal law, we're going to get rid of you, to recall or to impeach. But beyond that, if there is a Republican in the White House, then they have a lot more power to deal with the states that are recalcitrant against those rules for elections. Of course, making the law is not the end of it, but it's not far off the end of it. And it's another massive chip out of our opponent's armor, which several events in the last few years have been. Keith says, I sympathize with the idea that Trump is containment. It's hard to believe he'd get this far without it all being made up to make us want something better. Again, this is just almost a persecution or an inferiority complex. This is a willful, grand pessimism. Our opponent are just people. Most of them are idiots. They have installed power, but they're not masterminds. They have, yes, money, because the system mandates that we give them money. That's it. They're not masterminds. There are some intelligent people among them, but less now than even there were 10 years ago. The meritocratic sabotage of our nations has hit everywhere, including the orchestrators of it. I don't think they're the original orchestrators, but they're up the chain. They don't have a choice. Trump is popular because he's popular. Trump is getting far because he's popular. Trump is unstoppable because our opponent are not all powerful. And even the power they can wield has consequences. This is basic statecraft. It's basic power politics. Even if you have the power to do something, you can't necessarily get away with it. It's like, at any time, anyone on the street could strangle you and strangle to death. And yet, you walk past hundreds or thousands of people every day, and it never happens. 1 in a billion times that someone walks past someone, they'll strangle them to death. And probably less than 1 in a billion. Just because it can happen doesn't mean that they can just get away with it, which means it won't happen because they know they can't get away with it. Except in this case, they're so desperate, kamikaze, that they might. Again, if they kill Trump, it's definitely possible if they imprison Trump, but it'll have consequences. And we'll enter a new stage of the culture war, just like we did when they rigged the election. More people will be aware of the problem. So far, what I'm saying here is the pattern that we've observed. So I'm just letting it continue. Don't necessarily believe in containment, but I can see it being true. Oh no, I think containment is true as a strategy. Don't get me wrong. I'm always suspicious, not always, but I'm often suspicious of people that appear to be allies, possibly being containment. Laura Loomer, there's that theory that she's a male Mossad spy. I don't think it's true, but tactics like that do happen and they do work. But I don't think Trump is it. The idea of Trump seems too good to be true. Kinda. That doesn't mean he isn't. In 2016, he demonstrated that he will do a lot of the things he says he'll do. And our opponents' attacks against him are a bit too far to just be pantomime. But we will see. The notion that he did nothing as well, he actually did quite a lot, but it was all undone on day one by Biden. Most of the things he did were long-termism, which people also say democracy doesn't do, which of course it does. Yeah, Keith. But again, I think they are deathly afraid of the consequences if they try and kill him. Because even with JFK, they hid it. You know, they had a strategy. They got it's strongly suspect that it was, yes, the intelligence agencies that got rid of him. But I don't think there was quite the movement behind Trump, quite the rejection of corruption behind JFK that there is behind Trump. And either way, something is different that they're now afraid of doing it. Keith says they've killed loads of world leaders without remorse. JFK was popular and said he would get rid of the feds. It's a direct parallel, really. So why did they kill JFK and not Trump? Now, I think I'd need to know more about the specific history around JFK because you guys, no, I don't read. But with Keith, with the other world leaders, it's not the US. The US is a pretty powerful nation. I guess you probably know that. And they would rather not kill someone if it's not beneficial to them. And I think they reckon that killing Trump would not be beneficial to them, that it would definitely start a revolt and in their own nation. They don't mind revolts in other nations, but if they kill a leader of another nation and they expect revolts, they expect riots and a revolt, then they'll do it for the riots and the revolt. In this case, they don't. They want to maintain their power. So at home, they're reluctant to do it. They probably know exactly where people are going to go as soon as it happens. And as for JFK, I would surmise and suspect that there is genuinely more force of will behind Trump than there was behind JFK. Now, I don't know for sure, but there's also been a lot more time to assess what the problems are since then, and what with more specifics. And in the last 4 years, especially, but even in the last 10 that the culture war's been going on, a lot more people have become aware of the shape of the corruption of our nations. Whereas back in the early 2000s, it was much fewer were aware of it. To the point now that, maybe in 2016, just after he won, if they assassinated him right then, they would have gotten away with it, and it would have been beneficial to them. But for whatever reason, they didn't. Maybe they decided, well, maybe he'll be our guy, or maybe he won't be so bad, or maybe he'll just up and then we'll say, told you so, and they'll never do that again. But then for 4 years, he was actually pretty good. And he ended up becoming so beloved by then that they reckoned, okay, that might be a bad idea to kill him then. It's also possible that the FBI and CIA, though they may have been involved in the assassination of JFK or involved in the cover-up maybe, that they didn't actually instigate it, that someone else did. Someone who wouldn't stand to benefit now from getting rid of Trump. Also, Trump has not actually stated outwardly, I don't think, that he intends to get rid of the FBI or CIA. I think he may be leaving that implicit, maybe specifically to avoid the JFK thing. Now, maybe they suspect that he will do that, but they don't know. I think he wants to a fuera, but I don't think he's ever said that he's going to get rid of the CIA and FBI.